Welcome back to another episode of Weights and Wealth. This should be episode 27, but we're not exactly sure which episode this will actually be because tragedy has struck Weights and Wealth.
We've got some episodes here that might be released out of the order that they're filmed because basically what happened is we recorded episodes 24, 25, and 26 back in Charleston. And now we are in a new studio. So if you're watching us on video, we've got a new studio here because I bought a house. So we're recording in Tennessee. And unfortunately, right as we were about to release episode 25 and had episode 25 and 26 done, our hard drive failed us. And it is currently off in St. Louis, and we are trying to retrieve all of the data on it. So myself, not being much of an IT guy, did not back up any of our stuff. So
well, we're just learning along the way. Yeah. So we are buying 2 new hard drives, and the hard drives are only like $60 a piece. And to recover all the work, it's a lot more than that. But Ted has probably thousands of hours of work on that hard drive. So,
every single Weights and Wealth thing is on that hard drive. So
and Ted's Lift Help.
Yes.
If you guys patronize his Instagram.
So obviously not a good situation. But this episode and then episode 25, 26, 28, 29, those will all be coming out. We're really excited about episode 25 and 26 because those are good. But we'll just get into episode 27 here.
All right. So we actually have, or I guess we'll do our shout out first,
all right,
which is Reagan from Colorado Springs, Colorado, which Ted and I actually lived with Reagan probably 2 or 3 summers ago now.
Yep.
But he's shared a couple of reels. So thanks, Reagan.
Yep. Thank you for everyone that is sharing us on Instagram and helping us grow and supporting the show. We really appreciate it. And also, when you do that, you win a raffle for the Starbucks gift card every month. So Reagan is in that raffle now. Mm-hmm. Moving on to the weights wisdom of the week, you have to think of your progress in the long term. So don't expect dramatic results in the next 3 weeks, but think more of like the strength that you're going to gain long term. So don't try to put 10 pounds onto the bar to increase your squat every single week. Just slowly over the course of several weeks, progress by changing the tempo or adding sets and reps, and then over time increase that weight. And if you do that methodically, you'll wind up increasing the amount that you squat a lot more over time instead of just trying to hit a PR with more weight every single time.
Yeah, and like a lot of people think you should be hitting PRs week after week, and especially like high school, college now, a lot of kids want to hop on a cycle because they're not huge after 3 years of lifting. I was actually talking with this one guy I know that's in college, and he was thinking about doing that, but he was still like drinking on the weekends a lot, and his diet wasn't great. So like you should definitely fix both of those things before you even consider using some sort of anabolic steroid.
Yeah, everyone wants that shortcut, but if you can't even master the basics, first of all, like hopping on a cycle might not even work that well for you if you don't even understand how to properly do your nutrition and your programming, and are you even getting good sleep? Like if you're not mastering those basics, some people will hop on a cycle and it won't even help them that much.
Yeah, because I mean, if you're not working out, it's like creatine too. You know, if you're not lifting, it won't do anything.
Yeah, obviously super supplements a little bit different than creatine.
Okay.
But
yeah, it is. But even if you aren't lifting, I would still take creatine.
Yes, yeah. We've talked about that before, the benefits that it has for even just like your brain and your heart. Creatine is good for you.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Camera malfunction happening again. That's what that beep is. If you hear it during a lot of the episodes, one of our GoPros is very finicky, so...
Yeah, and cameras are next on our list to replace. We've been adding things, and see, we got this Constitution. I know Ted pointed it out earlier, but
Declaration of
we were really happy
with
it.
All right, our first article we have here is a Texas bill for tax breaks. So I wanted to get Nick's opinion on this to start off, but basically This bill in Texas would give credits for having children within a married family. So there's some qualifications to it. The parents have to be married, and it can't be like a child out of wedlock. So there's some stipulations there. And basically for each child that a married couple has, you'd get an additional tax break.
Yeah, so when I originally went through the article, I didn't know that you had to be married. So that's kind of interesting. Because a lot of, I don't know if any other programs like this require you to be married, which in one way it somewhat incentivizes single motherhood. But on the other hand, this could, I mean, I don't think it would. I don't think it's significant enough to, but like for somebody to stay in a bad marriage that they should leave. So, I mean, it's kind of tough, and this is kind of why government getting involved in people's marriages is generally not a great thing, in my opinion. But those are just kind of my thoughts.
Yeah, I think you make a good point about there's a lot of conjecture around the Lyndon B. Johnson Great Society welfare expansion, being one of the causes of the increase in like single motherhood because of getting tax breaks for having more children, and then the father being out of the picture. So this is kind of like almost the opposite of that.
Yeah.
So it's definitely trying to promote the nuclear family, which I think on one side is a good thing, but then as more of like a libertarian, I don't really like how the government is playing favorites. I'm really not in favor of most like subsidizing, and I don't like when the government picks winners and losers. So I definitely see both sides to this. But I do think it's funny that some people will come out and call this like unfair to people that aren't married. But on the other side, this has been happening for decades. So
yeah, and one of the things with taxation, whether it's intentional or not, there's always going to be an incentive placed on something, almost 100% of the time. So it like, and the legislators might not be intending that at all, which a lot of the times they do, because that's kind of like a tool to steer people away from activities that they shouldn't be involved in. That's why cigarettes and alcohol tend to be taxed at a higher rate. But those are also considered sin taxes because they're addictive. So that's a whole nother topic. But yeah, I think this is really interesting, and it also goes up to 10 kids, which is unheard of. Like I child tax credit, that might be 2 or 3 kids. I don't know off the top of my head, but it's much smaller. So if you come from a family of mine of 8 kids, like kids are really expensive, and
that's a big deal.
Yeah. And as you have more kids, sure, it can get a little bit cheaper as you're using like the economies of scale.
Hand-me-downs.
Hand-me-downs, yes. But like, I mean, food, like you generally need a larger house. I mean, I shared a bedroom growing up, so do a lot of my siblings, but you still do need a bigger house if you have 10 people in it.
Yeah.
So I just thought it was interesting that it goes up to 10 kids.
Overall, Nick, would you say you would support a bill like this, or would you not support a bill like this? If you were in the House in Texas and you had to vote yes or no?
I would say that I would. And I know we have a conversation coming up on UBI on one of these coming episodes. And this is a way that I would work something like that in, because it gives breaks to people who are raising kids, and that will benefit society as a whole.
I guess actually I disagree with what I was about to say. I was going to say that I think a lot of people would say that promoting the nuclear family is generally a good thing for the country and the economy, but I actually don't think a lot of people think that right now based off where the culture is going. But yeah.
Okay.
Should we move on to the next article we've got here?
Yeah, talk to. These intros keep getting longer and longer.
All right. This next intro article is, I thought it was fake news when I first saw it a couple weeks ago on Instagram. And then I looked it up, and it was not fake news. And right after that, I was very happy that I was closing on my house in April. So, Nick, do you want to introduce what it is?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so I read the article a little bit ago, but I don't know the exact money or like income thresholds.
I think it's 620 credit score. You you basically get subsidized for your interest rate for a mortgage, and then if you're above 680 or 700 around there, then you get basically penalized.
So it's credit score, not income.
Yeah, it's credit score.
Huh.
Yeah, and so basically, the point they say of this is to help first-time home buyers get like easier access to a mortgage and have monthly payments that are a little bit lower, and then the rich can afford an extra $100 on their mortgage payment. Now, the thing about this is I'm a first-time home buyer. I'm young. I wouldn't consider myself rich, right? I haven't had that much time to accumulate wealth. And yet my credit score, well above 700, I would get penalized in this if I was a week later on closing on my house. So it doesn't actually do that. It's not taxing the rich and helping the poor get easier access to a mortgage. For some people it might, but that's not exactly what it is, because credit score is not completely with wealth. It's just have you followed the rules and been good with debt, basically.
Right. Yeah. And I don't know the exact ins and outs of a credit score, but I would think that you have to have some negative marks on your credit. Like somebody with new credit of like a year should be over that 620. Like that's not the factor that's pushing it down. It's because you're not paying bills, you're late on rent.
Yeah.
So now, stuff like that.
But now does this you just talked about incentivizing people and like second and third order consequences. Is this incentivizing people to lower their credit score to get a better mortgage rate? Like
maybe a little bit.
Why do we even have
know.
Credit scores if this is like, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah. I don't know if it's enough of an incentive, because if your rate's that low, you're still paying a higher interest rate than somebody with a 750 credit score. And there's also, I guess, the ethical aspect of paying your bills.
Yeah.
So
it's definitely a strange time we're in. And also, I've seen some other people report on this, because the way we record our show, we have to wait a little bit for some of these intro articles. We can't hit on them right away when they come out. But I've seen some other people report on this, and they say, socialism is coming to America with this. Can you believe this? I'm like, socialism's already here. What are you talking about? Have you not been paying attention for the past 10, 20 years?
Yeah, I listened to this guy, Russ Roberts, who's very good economist. His podcast is a little dry, but I love it. And he calls it crony capitalism. Yeah. That's what he calls our economic system.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the downsides that people see in capitalism in America are just the side effects of crony capitalism and not real capitalism.
Yeah, just government getting in the way of business, essentially.
Yeah.
Or
picking winners and losers, like we talked about with the first article.
Yeah. Yep.
All right, let's move on to the weights and wealth topics. Today we'll be talking about how your brain can hijack your weights and your wealth.
Yeah, so we're kind of getting into psychology a little bit, which is out of our wheelhouse. So I just wanted to go over the operant, or the difference between operant and classical conditioning. And I remember learning this in my Psych 101 class, which I love that class. It's a really interesting topic. But essentially the difference is intent. So for classical conditioning, if you receive a stimulus while you're doing something, so the famous example is Pavlov's dogs. When they went to feed, they would ring a bell, and then after enough time, when they would ring a bell, the dogs would start to salivate. Now, the dogs didn't know that they were receiving that stimulus while they were eating. It just kind of happened. Whereas operant is more, it's used a lot to make a change in your life. Ted said this example is confusing, but I like the rubber band. If you're doing something that you shouldn't do, you snap a rubber band on your wrist, or
any system of like voluntary rewards or punishments to incentivize or stop a behavior is operant conditioning.
So that will kind of feed into what we're talking about today.
All right, you want to start with the wealth?
Sure. We actually have our notes on our phone today. Ted's sister's Katie is going to print our pages because the printer issues. Wasn't working. But that was really the only hiccup of the new studio, I think.
Yeah.
Overall, it went pretty well. So the first thing, actually, Ted wrote this down for us, that using credit cards instead of cash is just psychologically easier. Mm-hmm. Which I actually disagree. I consider cash almost to be like fake money because I know it won't hit my bank account. Like my bank account won't go down. Like once I have the cash in my wallet, like that, it's just there.
It's just free money at that point.
Yeah, because if I spend it, I won't see the number go down on my checking account.
That's funny because a lot of people, like I always learned to kind of fear credit growing up because you don't realize that you're spending a lot of money because you're not counting the change. But I guess I can see how that would be a thing because I've definitely done that before. I'll have a couple 20s in my wallet and I'll use that cash because I'll think, oh, it won't impact my bank account.
Yeah.
So I see what you're saying. I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah, I think most people get hurt more when they spend the cash, but especially recently, I just put it on I would rather spend the cash that I have.
Yeah. I do think that the credit card definitely psychologically manipulates people though, because even like a credit compared to a debit card, the way that the credit card doesn't hit your bank account immediately, like people just think they can like put it off and they don't see the immediate impact of it. And I feel like that helps people spend more money. I mean, that's the point of credit in like a capitalist society, is to allow people to spend more money that they don't really have to grow the economy. So
yeah, and I use an app called Mint and like it does a bunch of things, but one thing it does is track your net worth. So that still will go down when I spend on a credit card because it has all your assets, liabilities.
How much you spending at once that's impacting your net worth?
I mean, like it'll go down $100 and like, you know.
All right. Next, what you got next for us?
Next one is habits, because habits can really, you can start spending without second thought. So during tax season, we were starting to get busier, and Uber Eats sent me like a $15 credit for free food. And I was like, all right, fine, I'll just get it. Like, it's easy. And like, I waited a couple weeks to get it. Like, I was still bringing my lunch every day, and I waited a couple weeks, and then I got it, and I was like, oh, this is nice. And like, gradually I started getting it more and more every day.
Yep.
And then I was spending a few $100s a week on Uber Eats. I mean, I wasn't really paying for groceries, but
yeah,
because I mean, it was also saving me time. Like I didn't have to worry about going home at night, making dinner. Like I could still go to the gym. Like my schedule was wake up, work, gym, maybe like 30 minutes and then sleep.
Yeah.
I mean, so it is a time saver, but it is a lot of money. And I would try to eat healthier, but it's still not as good as it would be if I were making it at home.
Yeah, like that's pretty much a weights topic too at this point, because once you get used to doing that, okay, now you're not cooking as much. Your options are probably higher calorie, lower protein, and you start to fall into this cycle. And when that happens, I feel like people don't really realize that their diet has gotten off, but then it starts to get off really quickly. And usually when people's diet starts to fall off, they fall off in the gym as well. They kind of go hand in hand. And for a lot of people, once one of those falls off, the other one falls off too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like the momentum is super important. Mm-hmm. And another thing kind of on the habits is just, buying like a coffee every day. You just get used to it. It's just something that you do. What? It was so fun. Oh, we're having bad camera issues, and Alex is helping us out with them.
Thank you, Alex.
But
all right. Another example is betting. Is your brain can kind of hijack you, especially if, like, I feel like the people that are the worst at betting are the people that get lucky the first couple times, because then they just expect to win. So like the first couple years I started betting really on sports, I bet on Aaron Rodgers to win MVP. Mm-hmm. and it hit twice in a row. So I was like, oh, he's a lock.
Easy money.
Easy money. But you do really have to be careful with betting. I feel like most people just shouldn't bet because most people don't have that kind of control. But could we have talked about sports betting before on the podcast? I think the biggest thing is at the beginning of whatever season you bet on, first of all, it should be just on the sport that you've followed the most. You shouldn't be betting year round.
Like
it
cricket,
should just be
cricket or
stop betting on Russian women's tennis.
Yeah.
We have a friend that did that.
Yeah, because
got home from class one day, went right upstairs to his laptop, bet on Russian women's tennis. Couldn't even watch the game. Just had to throw a bet down. That was out of hand. That was not us. That was a friend of ours in college.
Yeah, because he thought he had his system worked out, and like the scratch-offs, if you have a system, you shouldn't be doing
too
it.
Deep. But yeah, if you are going to bet on sports, pick your sport. It should be the sport you follow the closest, so you have like the best chance. And then put aside a certain amount of money at the beginning of the season. That's your fund, and then you don't take extra money if you lose that, right? That's going to prevent you. It's just kind of like going to the casino and leaving your credit card at home. Just bringing a little bit of cash, using that cash. If you win money, great. And if you lose money, well, you only lose that little chunk that you set aside that was basically you were okay with losing. It's got to be money that you're okay with not seeing again.
Yeah, my sister's a senior in high school right now, and they're going to do a trip to like Bahamas or Mexico or something like that, and so she's gonna like gamble a little bit, and I was kind of telling her like just have a number in mind that if you hit that you walk away, which is hard to do. I mean, I've only been to a casino I think twice, and it's really hard to walk away, but the odds are that if you just keep playing, you're going to eventually lose all of it.
House always wins.
So yeah.
In our fantasy league, Nick wanted us to start betting on draft picks, and he's like, "Oh, I'll be the house guy."
Yeah, yeah.
Huge red flag and a friend there.
Because I would get to set the line, and setting the over under would be a little tougher, I think. But I think I could do it. But I could rig it in my favor for sure. One other thing, this kind of hits on the operant conditioning a little bit, is giving yourself like a treat once you hit a savings goal or something like that. Not something huge. You don't want to spend all the money that you just saved, but if you hit your goal of like 10 grand, maybe like go away for the weekend or something like that.
Some way of rewarding yourself so that you're conditioning yourself, basically.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's smart. I've got a story from Ranger School as we transition to the weights side of things here. And it's funny because after Nick and I had done the outline for this podcast, I was in the car with one of my Army buddies the other day, and he started telling literally this same exact story to me as we went by a gas station. So basically at Ranger School, you don't get to eat a lot of food when you're doing all the hiking, and they're basically sleep depriving and starving you to just see how you can operate under bad conditions. And then at the end of 5 or 10 days in the woods, after you're super hungry, you come back and they give you this feast of hot dogs and honey buns and soda. And they call it the Dog X. And the honey buns like attack your brain, and every time you see a honey bun after Ranger School, your brain just like tells you that you have to have it. So we were driving past a gas station the other day, and my buddy was like, "Oh, I could really go for a honey bun right now." So I asked him, "Is this a Ranger School thing?" And he was like, "Yeah." Ever since then, if I see a honey bun, I just have to have it. And it's just crazy how your brain can just kind of get hardwired and tricked into associating something with like nurturing you just because of the calories and the sugar after being so hungry. It's just this gravitational pull. I had never had a honey bun before Ranger School. And then after I got out of Ranger School, it's just like every time I'm in a gas station and I see a honey bun, my brain is just like pulling me towards it. And I'm like, I don't even want it. But for some reason, this association that you make So I think a lot of people do that with food because sugar is so powerful. And I think that's one of the reasons that like a lot of people have a lot of trouble with certain like trigger foods, you could call them.
Yeah, and I think this would be your classical conditioning, I believe. Don't quote me on it, but it sounds like you didn't know you were being conditioned to salivate every time you see a honey bun for the rest of your life.
I didn't know until it was too late. Yeah, that's literally like a Pavlov's dog kind of a thing.
Yeah.
You got any weights or like diet examples for your brain hijacking? I know we already went over the Uber Eats, so I guess that might be.
No. One thing I will say is I don't know if this exactly relates, but once you start really eating whole foods, I think your taste buds do adjust to liking it more.
Absolutely.
And it takes a little bit, but when I'm eating a very clean whole foods diet, like fruit, it tastes so sweet. Whereas it doesn't normally. Like a lot of people don't like fruit, but you don't know how good it should actually taste.
Yeah, I think there's two parts to that. So I think the first part is what you're saying, how your palate kind of adjusts when you're not eating super, super sweet things. And then a sweet potato or a kiwi or a berry will taste super sweet. So your taste buds definitely adjust. And then also an important part to that is if you're eating a mostly whole food diet, but then you're still eating like a cookie at night, that won't do it. Like you almost do have to go like full whole foods for your taste buds to really change. Otherwise you'll keep having those sugar cravings. But then the other part I think to it is when you eat sugar or other sweeteners, your dopamine will spike. And I think that when you stop doing that, you don't expect that dopamine spike internally when you're eating. So I think there's like two parts to it. I think it's the palate and the dopamine.
Yeah, which is why food can be addictive because it does hit your dopamine.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know about you, but like quitting nicotine or alcohol or caffeine cold turkey for me is not a big deal. But quitting like sugar can be a lot more difficult for me personally. I don't know. I
think for me, sugar's probably the easiest one to give up. I mean, right now I really don't eat any sugar, and that's just because I want to start eating more whole foods. It like wasn't intentionally sugar, but that's just kind of how it goes. Yeah. Caffeine is tougher. I can do it. Nicotine is...
I can do it. I just don't want to.
I mean, I know we talked about this before, but we do go through, like, we do intentionally stop drinking it for a little bit. And, like, I don't really get, like, I'll be tired, but, like, I don't get, like, headaches or anything like that.
Yeah. All right. Do we have a raffle or a book club? Our episodes are all kind of out of order here.
Yeah, so we can do that on the next episode.
Yeah. 28 or whatever. I think what we're going to do when we release these is we're just going to release them as they were previously numbered, and they might just show up on Spotify or YouTube or Apple Music out of order. It might just show up like 24, 27, 28, 25, 26 or whatever. But we are really excited to be back in the studio and get back to 2 episodes a week coming up here. As soon as we get that recovered hard drive back. So, if you would like to support the podcast, we really appreciate sharing on Instagram or especially even just through word of mouth, sharing with your like-minded friends and family that would be interested in either one or multiple of our 5 Fs here.
All right. Yeah, thanks for listening.